The sudden dismissal of the Indiana Fever's coaching staff and the restructuring of their front office occurred under circumstances that suggested a deeper internal crisis. While public attention focused on record jersey sales and rising ticket prices, the 2026 season nearly stalled due to an internal ultimatum. The most prominent athlete in the sport stopped promoting the league that made her a global figure, signaling a breakdown between the WNBA's star attraction and its leadership. For months, the most statistically significant player in the league's history was subjected to a level of physical targeting that exceeded standard professional competition. These incidents were often overlooked by officials, even as the league office leveraged the player's popularity to secure record-breaking television and gate revenue. While some viewed the aggression as a traditional initiation, the sustained nature of the fouls suggested a coordinated resentment. Veterans frequently dismissed her impact in public forums, creating a narrative of jealousy that contrasted sharply with the league's marketing of a new era. By 2025, this environment led to a physical breaking point. A player who had never missed a game during her collegiate career suffered significant groin and quad injuries. These were the direct result of a lack of protection on the court. During her recovery, the power dynamic shifted. The realization emerged that while she was essential to the league's financial growth, the organization had failed to ensure her physical safety or career longevity. From the moment she was drafted, the player faced a gauntlet of hostility rather than a welcoming environment. Despite the introduction of private charter flights and a massive influx of capital, she encountered persistent on-court aggression. Officiating remained inconsistent, with flagrant fouls routinely downgraded and intentional hits described by commentators as routine veteran play. Players who had spent their careers in smaller markets were suddenly performing for sold-out arenas, yet the person responsible for that growth became a primary target for physical frustration. The Indiana Fever front office was criticized for failing to support their primary asset, rather than surrounding a generational talent with seasoned enforcers or a system designed for her specific skill set. The organization maintained a flawed roster and a coaching staff that resisted her fast-paced style of play. Press conferences often involved the head coach publicly criticizing the rookie's shot selection and decision-making. Analysts compared the situation to placing a high-performance engine in a vehicle entirely unsuited for its power, then blaming the engine for the lack of results. The situation escalated when the Olympic roster was announced without the league's most famous athlete. The stated reasons of experience and chemistry were widely viewed as a political exclusion by an established guard. For the rookie, this served as a definitive signal. Despite shattering viewership records and securing better travel conditions for every player in the league, she remained an outsider within the sport's hierarchy. She maintained a professional public image, but the exclusion confirmed that the traditional system did not value her contributions beyond her ability to generate revenue. The financial disparity became impossible to ignore. Her rookie salary was negligible compared to the tens of millions she earned through global endorsements. She did not require the WNBA for financial stability. Instead, she was effectively subsidizing a league and a peer group that remained openly critical of her. This created a unique leverage point. The league required her presence to maintain its ratings and corporate partnerships, but she no longer needed the league to maintain her status as a global phenomenon. The emergence of lucrative alternative leagues transformed this tension into a legitimate threat. New professional formats offered high guaranteed contracts and equity stakes, presenting a model of player empowerment the WNBA could not match. Rival organizations began preparing offers to attract the sport's biggest draw away from the physical toll of the WNBA. The prospect of a multi-millionaire icon walking away from the league became a realistic outcome, as the incentives for staying continued to diminish. This reached a conclusion when an ultimatum was delivered to the Indiana Fever leadership. Reports indicated that the current environment was deemed unsustainable. The message was clear: without immediate and drastic changes to the coaching staff, the roster, and the organizational culture, the player was prepared to exit. This was not a standard trade request, but a statement from the sport's most powerful figure that she would no longer participate in a system that failed to protect her. The demand forced the organization to choose between its existing structure and its financial future. The mandate included firing personnel who hindered the team's progress, signing players who would provide on-court protection, and ensuring the league addressed officiating failures. This power play demonstrated that influence in women's sports had moved from the commissioner's office to the athletes who control the audience. The WNBA was ultimately unprepared for the superstar it had sought for decades. The player did not just highlight tactical errors, she exposed archaic business models and internal pettiness that had limited the sport's growth. By establishing a firm boundary, she redefined player empowerment. Whether she continues with the league or transitions to an alternative platform, she has secured the advantage. The system was forced to recognize that loyalty must be mutual, and a league cannot thrive while undermining the individual responsible for its success. The question remains whether the league is capable of managing a talent of this magnitude. The internal restructuring of the Indiana Fever was the first visible crack in a system that had grown too rigid to accommodate its own success. When the coaching staff was replaced, it wasn't merely a response to a losing record, but a total rejection of an outdated philosophy. For decades, the league operated on a model of seniority and incremental growth. The arrival of a player who commanded a global audience overnight rendered that model obsolete. The tension within the locker room was a symptom of a larger cultural friction between those who had built the league through sacrifice and a new generation that brought immediate, massive capital. This friction manifested in a style of play that bordered on professional negligence. The officiating crews, often composed of league veterans themselves, appeared to struggle with the speed and visibility of the modern game. They relied on a traditional interpretation of physicality that failed to account for targeted aggression. This lack of intervention created an environment where the league's most valuable asset was routinely placed in physical jeopardy, while the administration prioritized the marketing of that very same conflict. The financial structures of the WNBA further complicated this relationship. Under the existing collective bargaining agreement, rookie salaries remained capped at levels that were mathematically inconsistent with the revenue being generated. While the league celebrated a surge in television ratings and a 200% increase in merchandise sales, the primary driver of that growth was earning a base salary that covered less than the cost of her private security detail. This economic disparity created a power vacuum. Because the player did not rely on her league salary for survival, she was not subject to the same pressures of compliance that had historically kept athletes quiet. Her endorsement portfolio, which included multi-year deals with global tech and apparel firms, provided a level of autonomy that the league office found difficult to manage. The traditional leverage of a professional sports organization, the threat of fines or suspension, held no weight when the athlete in question was more financially stable than the franchise itself. This independence allowed her to dictate terms that would have been unthinkable for any previous rookie. The 2025 season served as a case study in mismanagement. As the physical toll of the gauntlet of resentment began to manifest in documented injuries, the league's response was largely performative. The introduction of charter flights was hailed as a major victory for player health, but it was a reactive measure, implemented only after the logistical nightmare of commercial travel for a global icon became a liability. Behind the scenes, the players' camp began documenting every uncalled flagrant foul and every instance of targeted aggression. This dossier would later become a central component of the ultimatum delivered to the front office. It wasn't just about the points on the scoreboard, it was about the fundamental right to a safe workplace. The league had spent years trying to convince the public that it was a major professional entity, yet it allowed its games to devolve into a spectacle of unpunished hostility. The exclusion from the Olympic roster was the final catalyst for this shift in strategy. While the selection committee cited the need for a cohesive, veteran-led unit, the decision was interpreted by analysts as a deliberate attempt to maintain the status quo. By denying the most famous player in the world a platform on the international stage, the establishment hoped to signal that she was still subject to their authority. Instead, the move backfired. It freed her from the obligations of the national team and allowed her to focus entirely on her own brand and physical recovery. It also alienated a massive segment of the new fan base, who saw the snub as a confirmation of the league's internal politics. The old guard had effectively chosen to protect their hierarchy at the expense of global growth. This miscalculation accelerated the player's realization that her interests were no longer aligned with those of the league's governing body. As the 2026 season approached, the rise of alternative professional leagues provided a viable exit strategy. These new organizations were built on a model of equity and player-led governance, offering contracts that included ownership stakes and direct shares of broadcast revenue. For an athlete who already possessed a global following, the prospect of playing in a league that viewed her as a partner rather than a commodity was increasingly attractive. The WNBA was suddenly forced to compete with a market it had previously ignored. The threat was no longer theoretical. Private equity firms were beginning to see the value in a decentralized sports model where the athletes held the intellectual property. If the Indiana Fever could not provide a professional environment that matched her market value and ensured her safety, she had the resources to build her own platform. The eventual purge of the Fever's front office and coaching staff was a pragmatic decision based on survival. The organization realized that losing their star player would result in a catastrophic loss of franchise value. Season ticket holders were already threatening to cancel, and local television partners had indicated that their contracts were contingent on her presence on the roster. The Ferrari in a pickup truck analogy became a rallying cry for fans who were tired of seeing elite talent wasted in a mediocre system. The new leadership was tasked with building a roster that was not just competitive, but protective. This meant prioritizing players who were willing to play a secondary role and act as a physical deterrent on the court. The focus shifted from traditional basketball metrics to a more holistic approach to team building, where the primary objective was the longevity of their central star. This era of player empowerment has permanently altered the negotiation process for future athletes. The idea that a rookie must earn their stripes through physical abuse and low pay is being replaced by a more professionalized, business-oriented approach. The player in question proved that a single individual can force a multi-million-dollar organization to pivot its entire strategy. This was not a rebellion based on ego, but a calculated business move designed to correct a market failure. The league's refusal to protect its assets was a failure of leadership that nearly resulted in the collapse of its most successful era. The 2026 season will be remembered as the point where the power shifted from the boardroom to the court. The broader implications for women's sports are profound. For decades, female athletes were told to be grateful for any opportunity to play professionally. This mindset allowed for subpar travel conditions, inadequate medical support, and salaries that required many players to seek second jobs overseas during the off-season. The rookies' refusal to accept these conditions broke the cycle of gratitude and replaced it with a demand for professional standards. By leveraging her massive social media presence and commercial success, she bypassed the traditional gatekeepers of sports media. She didn't need a press release to tell her story. She had a direct line to millions of people. This bypass of the old guard media was as significant as her on-court performance. It forced sports journalists to move beyond the superficial narratives of catfights and jealousy and focus on the economic and systemic issues at play. The 2025 injury crisis was a turning point that exposed the inadequacy of the league's medical and training protocols. When the Iron Woman of college basketball began to break down, it was clear that the physical demands of the WNBA, combined with the targeted play of opponents, were unsustainable. The lack of standardized recovery technology and the high volume of games in a short window created a perfect storm for soft tissue injuries. The Fever's initial failure to address these issues was a primary driver of the internal friction. The players' camp insisted on hiring their own specialized medical staff, a move that the league initially resisted but eventually had to concede. This set a precedent for other high-profile players to take control of their own physical maintenance, further eroding the team's total control over the athlete. The coordinated nightly assault mentioned in early reports was more than just aggressive defense. It was a failure of the league's disciplinary committee to recognize the long-term impact of non-basketball plays. When a player is consistently hit mid-air or targeted with hip checks away from the ball, it sends a message that the rules do not apply to everyone equally. The officiating crisis of 2025 became a focal point of the players' ultimatum. She demanded a transparent review process for officiating crews and a stricter enforcement of flagrant foul rules. This wasn't about seeking special treatment, it was about ensuring that the game was decided by skill rather than intimidation. The league's eventual agreement to implement these changes was a silent admission that the previous environment had been unsafe. As the dust settles, the financial reality of the WNBA continues to evolve. The influx of new sponsors and the renegotiation of broadcast rights have created a surplus of capital that is slowly trickling down to the players. However, the disparity between the top earners and the rest of the league remains a point of contention. The savior of the sport has used her platform to advocate for a complete overhaul of the salary cap structure. She understands that her own success is tied to the overall health of the league. If her teammates and opponents are not paid professional wages, the quality of the product will eventually suffer. This advocacy has earned her a level of respect among her peers that was previously absent. They are beginning to see that her presence in the league is a rising tide that can lift their own financial prospects. The 2026 restructuring of the Indiana Fever also included a significant investment in the team's practice facilities and infrastructure. For years, the team had shared space with other organizations, leading to scheduling conflicts and a lack of dedicated recovery areas. The new front office prioritized the construction of a world-class performance center, a move that was directly influenced by the players' demands for a more professional environment. This facility became a recruitment tool, allowing the Fever to attract the loyal enforcers needed to protect their star. It signaled to the rest of the league that the days of treating women's professional basketball as a secondary operation were over. The cultural shift within the league is perhaps the most difficult change to quantify. The old guard, who once resented the rookie's fame, are gradually being replaced by players who grew up watching her. This new generation views her as a pioneer rather than an intruder. The hostility that defined the 2024 and 2025 seasons is giving way to a more competitive yet professional rivalry. The veterans who were most vocal in their criticism have found themselves sidelined as the league's marketing focus has moved toward the future. The narrative of waiting one's turn has been replaced by the reality of a meritocracy where influence is earned through audience engagement and economic impact. The ultimatum delivered to the Fever was a moment of clarity for the entire industry. It proved that a professional athlete can be both a superstar and a sophisticated business operator. The player's ability to navigate the complex politics of the league while maintaining her performance on the court is a testament to her maturity. She recognized that her career was being handled by people who did not share her vision for the sport's future. By forcing their hand, she didn't just save her own career, she forced the WNBA to grow up. The league was forced to decide if it wanted to remain a niche organization with a loyal but small following, or a global powerhouse that could compete for the attention of the next generation of sports fans. Looking forward, the success of the 2026 season will depend on whether the league can maintain the changes it has been forced to implement. The officiating must remain consistent, the marketing must continue to evolve, and the physical safety of the players must remain a priority. The threat of alternative leagues remains a reality, and the WNBA must continue to prove that it is the best place for the world's elite talent. The war of leverage may have been won by the player, but the peace must be managed by the league. They have been given a second chance to nurture a phenomenon that they nearly destroyed through negligence and ego. The eyes of the world are watching to see if they can handle the responsibility. The transformation of the Indiana Fever from a struggling franchise into a model of player-led success has become a blueprint for other teams. The Fever model involves a deep collaboration between the star player and the front office, ensuring that every roster move and strategic decision is aligned with the goal of maximizing the player's impact. This has led to a more cohesive brand and a more loyal fan base. The team's jersey sales continue to lead the league, and their road games remain the most attended events in women's sports. The economic impact of this single player has been estimated in the hundreds of millions, a figure that highlights the absurdity of the original rookie salary scale. Ultimately, this period in sports history will be defined by the realization that talent is the ultimate currency. The structures and institutions that manage that talent are only as relevant as the athletes they represent. The WNBA's near collapse and subsequent recovery were a direct result of its failure to understand this basic economic principle. By treating its most valuable asset as a disposable commodity, it risked losing everything. The player's decision to draw a line in the sand saved the league from itself. She forced a conversation about value, safety, and respect that was long overdue. As she steps onto the court for the 2026 season, she does so not as a rookie hoping for acceptance, but as the architect of a new era. The game has changed, the rules have been rewritten, and for the first time in the history of the sport, the power is exactly where it belongs.